And Dr. Lanning, I'm just so proud of you. I've been following your career, and thank you for the nice things you said about me. What a beautiful group. I mean that sincerely, and I just believe great things for the community. What a great name, by the way, for a congregation. We are the light of the world. There's so much darkness in the world around us. It says in Bereshit, in early Genesis, that there was darkness and void. But then, V'ruach Elohim archefet apanei hamayim, the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the water, piercing the darkness and bringing new light and life. And I just am just so pleased to be part of you this morning. I'd like you to open up your Bibles, please, to where we read this morning, Bamidbar, Numbers, Parashat Bamidbar. Let me hear you say Midbar. Midbar is the word for wilderness. Bamidbar is in the. So Bamidbar is the name of the book in Hebrew. It's known as Numbers to moderns that speak the English language. And the reason why it's known by that is because it begins with a numbering. And what I'd like to do this morning is begin by taking a look at the numbers in Numbers, and you're going to see a tragedy in it. And I want to consider the tragedy that you're going to see. I want to unpack it a little bit as something of a social scientist more than a theologian. And then I want to take us to a place in the Newer Testament where Rabbi Paul takes a look at the very story that I'm going to be alighting upon, speaking more statistically. If you'll look in Numbers chapter 1, as we'd read, and I want you to just consider again in chapter 1, verse 2, where Moshe Rabbeinu, where Moses is beckoned to take a head count of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. He says in verse 3, you're to muster by the divisions every son from 20 years and upward available to serve in the army of Israel. So we're looking at the very beginning in the book of Numbers, where we're right at the base of Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, were in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. But Moshe Rabbeinu, through signs and wonders, miracles, led them out of Egypt. And they come down to Har Sinai. And they're there at Sinai for the better part of a year. And now we're in the literature where Moshe Rabbeinu is beckoned to number the males of military age. Those could be counted upon. We know from the beginning of Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 1, in the very first verses of the text, we're told it's an 11 days journey from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which is right at the border of Canaan. It took them 39 years to get there. It was supposed to be an 11-day journey. I like to say Jews are good at a lot of things. Directions isn't one of them. If you ever get lost in a city, you don't know where you're going, and you see a guy with a yarmulke on, don't ask him, excuse me, how do you get there? We don't know from nothing. They wandered and wandered. And it's a tragedy. The tragedy is underscored. If you look here at the beginning, if you look in chapter 1, if you go to verse 46, after numbering all those that could be counted upon to bear arms, it was supposed to be an 11-day journey, and they were going to go into Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. We're told those that were to bear arms, all those who were counted totaled 603,550. Now, if you're looking at a population of 603,550 males, 20 and upwards of military age, you can extrapolate from that. You can figure a population of that size has a certain amount of males that haven't met the threshold of 20 years yet. They're younger. And you can figure there's a population as well of those that are beyond military age. When war broke out in Israel, I made a few, I said, look, I'm retired police, so I know how to use a machine gun. I'm happy to come and help. I ran 3 police academies in North Texas. If you need a gun, count me in. What do they need from a 68-year-old man? No, thank you. They don't want to know from nothing. They can take care of that. Now, if you're looking at an army here of those that can fight, there are the males that are too young to fight and those that are too old to fight. And that's only half the population if you figure there's women as well, little girls, young women, and older women. If you're looking at a population of 600 plus thousand soldiers. You can extrapolate from that a crowd of about 200,000. You with me on that when you do the math? Now, I want to talk about math for a minute, but here's the crisis. Here's the problem. If you look in Numbers chapter 26, verse 51, we're now 38 years later. If you look in Numbers chapter 26, verse 31, what you have are the number of those when they did a census at the end of the wilderness trek. And we're told there in verse 51, 26:51, the sons of Israel here totaled 601,730. So you're looking at a loss after 39 years. You're looking at a loss of 1,800 and some soldiers. Are you with me on that? Now, one would think, here you're looking at a population in the wilderness. You would expect there to be population growth in a 39-year period of time. There's no birth control, there's no TV. What are they doing at night? One would expect for there to be an expanded population. Now, if you want to look at population studies and growth, and by the way, at Cambridge, I won't get too into it, I did a master's degree in applied criminology and management, now a PhD as a social scientist in the field of criminology. It's all about math and data. Now, if you look at a population of some 2 million people, and if you wanted to look at population growth, what would a reasonable statistic be? If you're looking at rural, agrarian, poor populations, you're looking at about a 2.2% population growth per annum, which would be the norm. If you push that out 40 years, you're looking at a population that would have been 4,776,000 people. Now, what you have, however, after 40 years into this, what you have is a net loss. At least what's numbered of the fighting force of the males of the species. What that tells me is that something has gone horribly wrong. So, thank you. Something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. In fact, if you look at the book of Numbers, and while I looked at the numbers in Numbers, the beginning and the end, I think more suitable to get to the ethos, to the distinguishing characteristic of the literature, is the Hebrew name that's assigned to it, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. And the reason why I say that, if you look at the book Bamidbar, it records the wilderness journey from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, where they sent the spies, where they wandered around thereafter until they all died in the wilderness. And the book of Numbers records what some refer to, mistakenly so in my opinion, what some refer to as the highlights of the wilderness journey, but I more liken it to the lowlights. When you look at the book of Numbers, you're looking at something that's gone horribly wrong. Now, I don't know about you, but me, I'm the kind of guy, I like to be further along in life. I like to move forward. I want to grow. You know, I'm 68 and a half. I know I'll be dead soon, but I don't plan on dying until I die. You know, and until that happens, I plan to throw my energies into life and get after it. I do. I didn't do it this morning. Yesterday I'm in the gym pumping hours, pumping weight. The day before that I'm running 6 to 7 miles in the morning. The day before that 6 or 7. You don't get to be this good looking by accident at my age. Okay? You've got to work at it. You know, I want to go after it. I'm currently a student at Cambridge University. It'll be my 3rd doctorate. I'm not boasting. I'm going to graduate when I'm 72. 72. I thought they should have not even let me into the program, because you ought to give those slots to people that have a little more runway. They have a little more ahead of them. I'm somewhere between going, and gone. I don't care. I wondered whether I was the oldest person that was ever going to get into Cambridge, to tell you the truth, and I learned, no, I'm not. The oldest was a woman who took her PhD when she was 93. I think we need to dream and live and love and throw our energies into this thing called life. I didn't ask to be born here. I don't know that in heaven there was this little special request box and I put a name in it and said, please send me, send me. I don't know how I got here. All I know is that 68 and a half years ago, the door opened up, my mother dropped me off. Welcome to planet Earth. You're not getting back in. I'm dropped off on this thing called life. And I, like you and we, are going to make decisions about what we're going to do with this thing called life, imperfect as it is. None of us gets a perfect hand. If you're playing poker, you get 4 aces dealt, you can just sit there and bluff. When you throw down, you're going to win the moment. We don't get 4 aces in our hand. We got to play with whatever cards we're dealt. And we don't always get good cards. The question is, how can you win? And the reason why I say that is we're looking at losers here. And what I want to do is take a look at the loss through the eyes of a rabbi in the Newer Testament. And I mentioned this, if you're Catholic, you call him St. Paul. If you're a Baptist or a Lutheran, it's the Apostle Paul. I like Rabbi Shaul personally. That's just kind of sort of the way I roll. It's the way that I'm oriented. I'm not trying to disrespect Catholics or Baptists or anybody else, but I like looking at the good news through the eyes of the Jews. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics of our movement. Now, if you look in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and the reason why I want to go there is you'll see where Rabbi Paul is alighting upon the miseries. And there are a few reasons. I'm interested in why did they fail? Why the loss after all that time? I wasn't there. I'm only 68 and a half. Depending on when you date the Exodus, some say about 1450 BC, some say 1250 BC. I wasn't around. That's thousands of years ago. And so I can't really speak to it. I can look at the literature itself, the Torah, and it gives you a window into it. But Rabbi Paul, gives something of a synopsis of what went wrong. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to take a look at what went wrong, but flip it to talk about what to do, what's right. There's an old saying, a wise man learns from his mistakes. That's true. A wiser one learns from somebody else's. And what I want to do is look and see what happened. And I think it's really important. All of us are on a journey from the womb to the tomb. We're heading somewhere in life. And I think all of us, irrespective of our age in life, all of us should be concerned for the future. Now, I believe the quality of the future has something to do with the kind of decisions that we make at the present. And the decisions that we make at the present are going to have something to do with the way that we're thinking. I think it's important to have good vision. I don't know if you've ever, well, I know you have. You've driven down the street, you saw there's a squirrel that got run over, there's a deer that's got run over. Who's ever seen that before? Now, in life, amongst human beings, there's a lot of roadkill on the highway of life. Okay, people that just got run over, it didn't work out. If success in life was easy, everybody would have it. There are people that don't. There's casualties, there's roadkill. The question is, how can we avoid it? Well, what I want to do is look a little bit at, in medical nomenclature, necropathy, to look at the study of death, the deterioration of cells. What brings about decay, despair, disorientation. A lot of young people, it's just a characteristics of youth is a kind of enthusiasm. You graduate from high school, yay, go, and you're ready to throw your energies out there. And there's a kind of natural enthusiasm that you can find at 18. You don't find it in 28. Usually it's gone by 38. By 48, you're just hanging on. I'm not saying you are, but I wasn't born yesterday. I've seen a lot of despair. Now, I want to look at Rabbi Paul here. If you look in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, he says, and when he writes the Corinthians, by the way, this is just a tragedy on steroids of the Corinthian congregation. It's an absolute mess. I just wrote a commentary on 1 and 2 Corinthians. I was going to bring it and some other books, but I decided not to. I didn't come here to make a buck this morning. I came here to make a difference, to make an impression. If you look here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu, the Shekinah led them through the wilderness. And remember they followed Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, through the Red Sea. They all were immersed into Moses in the cloud and the sea. And he goes on and he's talking about the wilderness trek, how God led them, he says. But in verse 5, nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, for they were struck down in the wilderness. That, here God delivered them. He did this and that, signs and wonders, miracles. But they died in the wilderness. For me, hey, listen, dying in Egypt, in the sands of Egypt, dying in the wilderness, what's the difference at the end of the day? I probably would have preferred just dying in Egypt. For all these miracles, for all the goodies, for all the goodness, it didn't work for these people. It didn't work. Now, there's this romantic gloss, the Jews, the chosen people. Listen, I'd rather have people love us than hate us, but look at what we're dealing with here. You know the story. You know the story. Human nature. For me, I look at the Bible like a cop. You can read 5 minutes into the Bible, Genesis 1, 2, and 3. You can just, wrap yellow crime scene tape all around the beginning of it. A property crime with Adam and Chava, take this, don't eat this, don't touch, they eat. And then there's murder in the 4th chapter. Brother kills brother, Cain and Abel. In the 5th chapter, there's assault and murder and a man boasting to his wives. Wives, plural. Now, in the Bible, it doesn't say a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wives. But something has gone wrong. Well, specifically to the wilderness, and what I want to do is just take my lead a little bit from Rabbi Paul, and what I want to do is just alight upon what he says are the principal problems. So when you hear this, don't do this. Usually a rabbi, a reverend, I want you to hear what I have to say and do it. No, don't. Stop. Don't forget it. When I'm about to tell you, if you want to be successful, do the exact opposite. Relative to the decay, despair, and disorientation in the wilderness, he says in verse, I'm getting so old, big print, really? 6. Now these things happened. This decay, despair, disorientation, this happened as an example for us. So we shouldn't, number 1, crave evil things. Crave evil things. And I want to just alight upon 4 things that he says here. And then what I want to do is look at 2 of them in the Torah that kind of connect. And then I want to pivot from it and give a little Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations report, which you would normally expect if an executive director of an organization comes. But I want to give a little spiritual payload here, not just talk shop. That people don't come to hear shop. People are looking for some biblical medicine for life's assorted hurts. But if you look here, the problem per Rabbi Paul, he says, look, they craved evil things. In verse 7, he says they were idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat, drink, and rose to play. And this is harking back to the story in Shemot and Exodus, the 32nd chapter, where Moshe Rabbeinu was up on the mountain communing with God, getting the 10 Commandments, and God says, listen, you need to go back. It's not so good. They're having a party. Now, I raised boys. When my wife and I would go away on vacation, it's better you don't know what happens back at the house. I get it. The cats, the way the mice play, I wasn't born yesterday. And what happens is Moses is gone. He's gone. He's been gone for a while. And the people get the spilkies. They get a little antsy. They build a golden calf and they're partying. There's debauchery. There's that party spirit in conjunction with it all. A little weird there. And that sort of stuff will be people's undoing. That sort of stuff. In any case, so what it is, he harks to craving evil things. I want to look at that with you in a moment. He talks about idolatry, and he's talking about the golden calf and the party spirit and all that. In the next verse, 8. Let's not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And on one day, 23,000 fell. There's a story there in the 25th chapter in Numbers. A tragic story that, and by the way, I know it because I raise boys. Listen, you can spend 18 years raising a boy, and the wrong girl can undo that in about 18 seconds. I wasn't born yesterday. I know I keep saying that. One time I pulled a guy over at a traffic stop. He was so stupid. I know it's not very pastoral to talk that way. What I did is I took out my license, which you shouldn't do. And I said, I want you to look at that. He says, aren't you supposed to ask me for my license? Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. He's just being so stupid with me. So I said, what does it say when I was born? I hid the address there. What does it say? It said November 9th, 1955. And then he said, why are you telling me this? And I said, because I want you to know I wasn't born yesterday. I wasn't born yesterday. Okay, so I digress. But I know. Did he laugh? I don't remember. He wasn't in a very happy mood. I'm kind of rabbi now, reverend kind of thing, but put on a police uniform, I kick into another kind of gear. But that's another story. I was a good cop, but sometimes a cop's just got to do what a cop's got to do. What can I say? But I don't want to get into all that because it just confuses people more than... When I was courting my wife, I says, honey, look, I got some good news and some bad news. She said, what's that? I says, look, here's the deal. I think I have multiple personality disorder. She says, why is that? I says, well, I can't figure out whether I'm a Christian or a Jew or a Pentecostal or a professor or a pastor or a rabbi. She says, what's the good news? I said, well, the bad news is I think I have multiple personality disorder. The good news is every one of them is making a living. Ka-ching. I says, look, you marry me, I got to keep my woman in diamonds and furs, so don't worry, ka-ching. Oh, I like money. I do. In fact, Rabbi Lanning sent me a text this morning. Who should I make the check out to? You get an honorarium for speaking. I said, well, Jeffrey Seif. Do you want me to spell it? Don't misspell it. Seif. By the way, you had mentioned Joan with an air conditioning. Where's Joan? How long has your air conditioning been broken? Couple months. It's getting hot. Give the honorarium to her. Okay, whatever they take. Whatever they take. Look, for me, people wonder why there's so many Christians in the South. My God, all you have to do is get behind a pulpit and say, do you want to spend eternity in a summer like this? I think all you need is an air conditioning. You can fill the house. That's my opinion. If hell's going to be like this, I don't want to go. Okay, I digress. Here, if you look in the literature, no, but give her the check. It's all yours. Okay? Listen, sometimes we need a little help. Okay, so if you look here, he says, don't commit sexual immorality. That's a real deal killer. That just messes stuff up. And then he says in verse 10, let's not grumble. Some people forever kvetch. What I want to do this morning is look at grumbling. I want to look at complaining. Some people just have a perennial negative attitude. We just default to dark space, and we're always seeing problems when they don't necessarily exist, or they're not as bad as we make them out to be when we kick it around. I want you to look at grumbling. What I want to do is look at two examples. There's four here that are noted, but I want to look at two and see how it's stitched together with grumbling. I want you to go back to Numbers, please. And I want to look at Numbers chapter 11. It's all over the place. I want to look at Numbers chapter 11 here. And we'll pick up in verse 4, we're told the grumblers among them began to have cravings. Remember that Rabbi Paul said that evil cravings. It says here, the grumblers began to have cravings. So Bnei Israel began to wail repeatedly, saying, if we could just eat some meat. We remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt for free. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we have no appetite. We have never seen anything but this manna. Now they're fetching. Here they are in the wilderness, and they're thinking, all we have is this junk to eat that falls out of heaven. And they start going, well, back in the day, baby, it's like a delicatessen. We had meat, we had fish, we had melons. It was so good. Oh, back in Egypt, it was so good, so good. Now, the last I checked, they were slaves back in Egypt. But it's interesting how people are delusional in their thinking. Some people say, oh, I remember before I became a believer in Yeshua, I used to go out there and the partying and the girls or the guys and the drugs and this, and now here I am living this monastic life in church. Well, if it was so good back then, who put a gun to your head and made you pray the sinner's prayer? Who pushed you out? Once upon a time, there was something inside of you and me that said, that's not so good. We want to go for an alternative. And I hear there's a new one. If being born hasn't been all that it's cracked up to be, I hear you can be born again. Let's get a reset button and try something new, following God. Okay? But what happens is sometimes people can look back and fantasize about how good it was back in the day. The reality is it wasn't that good. It wasn't that good. I got to have a cigarette. I got to have a drink. I got to have a drug. Oh, I just feel so much better when I have it. It's not that good at the end of the day. But people become delusional in their thinking, and then they're grumbling. Oh, back in the day. Now, in all fairness to the argument, there's some truth to it. That the Egyptians did feed them reasonably well. The reason why they'd feed them is they wanted to breed them. They want them to finish dinner and then go home and make new slaves and then wake up in the morning and whoosh, get beat to death again. But there's always a new crop coming. So you'd feed them so you could breed them. But there's a sense in which there's this delusional approach to life. But sometimes in complaining, you exalt yourself above. Kai Cohen was a Jewish guy. He converted and became a Trappist monk. So he goes to the monastery and he speaks to the abbot and he says, look, when it all began, he says, I want to be a monk. He says, you can't be a monk, you're Jewish. I converted. I want to be Catholic, be a monk. So he says, you won't like it here. Cohen said, why not? He says, because in this monastery, you can only speak 2 words every 5 years. And if you're sensing it's a joke, you're right, but follow me. You can only speak, 2 words every 5 years. Okay. So Cohen goes into the monastery. He gets a new name, Father Peter. So what happens, 5 years later, there's a paper that slipped under his door, come and see the abbot. So he goes and he sits down in the abbot's office. He's sitting there, the abbot behind the desk, and Cohen comes and sits. And the abbot looks at him and goes like this, 2 words. And Cohen said, food stinks. The abbot smiles, okay, whatever. So he goes back. 5 years later, there's a note that slipped under his door. And Cohen or Peter comes and sits in the abbot's office, and the abbot, 2 words. He says, bed's hard. And the abbot smiles at everything and sends him out. 5 years later, what happened is Cohen or Peter is in his cell, and there's a note slipped under the door, you got to go see the abbot. So he goes to the abbot, and the abbot smiles, and 2 words. And Cohen says, I quit. And the abbot says, that doesn't surprise me. You've done nothing but complain ever since you got here. You people, there's always a negative, there's always something negative. Well, I make a joke of it. But now to pivot and get to the point. It's good to joke about it. It's just not good to be that way. You know, if I put blue tint on my glasses, everywhere I looked, and if I was asked to describe it, what color is this? Well, I see a little blue here, a lot of blue here. Blue. Everywhere I look, I'd see blue. But it's less about what's in the environment. It's more the lens through which I'm seeing the environment. Now, there are some people, they are so negative, and you might know someone like this. It's almost like they have invisible 3 letters on their forehead, EGR. Extra grace required. Because you know, whenever you're proximate to them, there's going to be energies to kind of suck you into a negative vortex. Now, when you talk to those people, they think they're describing the world around them. Well, the problem with her is this, and the problem with the congregation is that, and the problem is here, the problem is there. They think they're describing the world around them, but they're really describing the world that's interior to them. There's a line in Shakespeare, methinks he speaks too much. They say more about themselves than the things they're purporting to describe. Now, what we want to do is keep the genie in the bottle. And the complaining. Now, the truth of the matter is people say, oh, those Jews, I can't believe it. They were in the wilderness, they were complaining. Well, I don't know if you've ever been in the wilderness. On one hand, I can understand it. There's stuff to complain about. Joan, I mean, the air conditioning's broken. How was the ride this morning? I mean, look, to tell you the truth, over there it's only 90 degrees. I mean, it's 104 in the shade in the wilderness. I mean, the truth of the matter is, there were circumstances. The reality is there are road bumps on the highway of life. Whether it's the air conditioning or whatever, and there's stuff that'll have to be in the next rotation that I do plan. With God's grace for the union, the congregations to double in size in about a 2-year period of time. How do you do that? I'll tell you how to do it. You go, you find needs, and you find a way to service them. Let me illustrate. One of the things that I observed, and this is just because I've been in the South, I learned there were a lot of Hispanic people with Jewish extract that were being disrespected. They had no entrance point. You're not real Jews. You're just fakes. You're just wannabes. And I'd run into many like that. And in South America, individuals that are displaced persons from the Iberian Peninsula with Columbus comes over to the New World. Individuals referred to as Moranos, Conversos, Anusim. There's a real problem there. Nobody wanted to touch it. And we have a regional director in Brazil that was really passionate. And so, I said, let's get behind. So we had a conference in March of this year in San Antonio in Brazil. We had over 1,000 people come, which is a lot for a Messianic conference. Never mind the 7,000 people that viewed online. Never mind those. The UMJC has, in its work in South America, built a museum dedicated to the Inquisition. And we secured a database. Do you know, in Spain and Portugal, it was that anyone that could prove that they're of Jewish extract and they're descended from Portugal and Spain can get automatic citizenship. We've helped 1,400 people get citizenship. One of whom was a guy who recently was elected to be a senator in Brazil, who was one of the speakers, a Jewish believer. And when I say senator, I don't mean like the Texas State Senate. I mean like one of the federal senators. So it's in the federal government. And soon as he got into office, he organized a group. Brazil turned away from the Jewish people with this crazy president. What he did is he built a coalition of over 136 politicians and led a delegation to Israel in December of last year. And Benjamin Netanyahu met with him. And he apologized for Brazil and explained how they're working to turn it around. It's a fascinating story. And there was inasmuch as you see protests of anti-Semitism, a few hundred people, maybe. Actually, in Brazil, they came out in support of Israel, a few 100,000. Okay? Now, and there's just an example. We had this conference, and 45 congregational leaders signed up and expressed interest in the union. Now, we vetted them. There were some that didn't quite apply. We just began initially with 8 that we moved through. Not only there's issues in Africa as well with the Lemba tribe, if you're familiar with that. There are displaced persons. If you were to go to Israel today, you'll see people that are black, that are white. We come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And we're picking up new communities in Africa. Not only that, right now as I speak, our former president, Howard Silverman, is in the Ukraine with Boris Golden, one of our regional directors. He'll come back in a few days with half a dozen or 10 new congregational applicants from the Ukraine. I'm going to be in Russia in a few months, in November, with Boris, and I'll come back with much the same. So we're at a place where we're seeing the growth of the union of Messianic Jewish congregations as an international association. It really is quite fascinating. What I want to do, what I plan to do with that, we have a program called Friends of the Union. Nothing has happened with it. Now, my wife, God bless her, my wife Barry, a sweet 70-year-old lady, and the reason why I mention her age is because she'll tell you. But I'm telling you, she doesn't look 7. I look at her and go, that's 70, that's what I'm talking about right there. My wife, just beautiful inside and out. She just started a little nonprofit a couple years ago. You know, last year she herself raised $200,000 to send to Israel. And every year it's $150,000 or something like that. I was just with her in Israel a few weeks ago. I got back 2.5 weeks ago. And we just go there and give away money. We're so popular. When Barry comes, everybody's so happy to see her. Me, they don't. Me, they go, he's going to be asking for something. He's begging. He's with the union. And my wife shows, oh, hi. Everyone is so happy. I'm telling you that if you look at the needs in South America in the Messianic community, in Mexico, Central America, if you look at South America, if you look at Europe, the Ukraine, we just picked up a congregation in France. We just picked up one in Italy that went through the vetting process. But you look particularly at these communities in the Ukraine, they're ravaged because of war. If you look in Russia as well, these congregations are ravaged. Finding congregations is easy. Helping them is what I want to do, where we're going to expand our Friends of the Union program. Remember how I used to be able to go into a church and there's a mission board there, our missionary in Burkina Faso, and there's a picture of the family and the needs, so our community is made aware of it. What we're going to do with all these new communities coming in and our Friends of the Union, people can just peruse it and say, oh, here, I feel the Lord telling me to send $100 to this organization. Just send it direct. You don't need to send it to us. I don't need a 10% administrative fee. Just get right to helping these people. Listen, there's lots of problems in this world. The question is, how can we be part of the cure? And if we're minded to want to help people, sky's the limit. And we're going to explode it by discovering new Messianic communities, discovering needs, and servicing those needs. I was in Israel just 2.5 weeks ago, and a friend of mine, Boaz Michael with First Fruits of Zion, asked me to speak at the Brahms Center there. And I gave a lecture. It was rather academic. I kind of pivoted from research. The social science in nature. It's not like a homiletical exposition with a little exhortation about the union as you're getting this morning. Boaz told me that this summer, he told me, he says, Jeff, you know, in 2019, I had this vision to start these Torah clubs for people that just want to get together and start. He says, we have 1,000 Torah clubs right now. He said, but the thing is, some of them have grown, 50 people, 100 people. He says, Jeffrey, we're not a denomination. We're just a Bible literature production outfit. For these communities that are maturing, they need a place to go. And would you please work with us? But just between what we're discovering on our own going out into the world, and then having friendly relations with other ministries, instead of it being characterized by jealousy and anger and who's going to get my dollar and who's going to get my turf, just by working together with others. I'm believing personally that the best days are ahead of us. Now, as I close, I want to thank you for wanting to throw your lot in with the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations. I consider myself honored to have the opportunity to serve as the executive director. I want to encourage you, if game to, we're having our annual conference this summer in Orlando. It's going to be gala. And then in January of 2025, we're going to have our Winter Leadership Conference. And I just met with our executive committee that what we're going to have right after our Winter Leadership Conference is have just a special thing with the executive committee and the steering committee to look at what's involved in retooling the union to be an organization that's just not surviving, but thriving. And I believe that we can make the case for the need to retool, to look over the horizon. Sometimes you can't put new wine in old wineskins. Sometimes you have to think new thoughts. You have to be willing to be creative. We tend to be into our traditions and to have an aversion to change. But what we're going to do is just get everybody together, like-minded people, leaders. What do we want to do? Where do we want to go? I hope that you, like me, have an attitude of life where sky's the limit. A lot of people don't. We have it when we're young, but we just get beat up so much. We just get beat up. And we're just kind of hanging on. That's no way to live. Sometimes we're stuck. Do you know that a shark can drown? I don't want to give you lessons about sea creatures. We're so close to the water, and I grew up around New York City. Well, there's the Hudson there, too, and the Atlantic not far away. I don't want to lecture you about sea creatures, but do you know that a shark can drown? I didn't know that. What happens is, there's the gills on the side of the shark, and the water goes into the gills, and that's how it breathes. Internal to the shark, it extracts oxygen out of the water that comes into the gills. But how do you get water into the gills? You get water into the gills by forward momentum. And what happens is that as the shark is moving forward, it oxygenates the system. And my hope with the union now, as we move forward, we oxygenate the system. And it brings new energies that wouldn't otherwise be there. Sometimes what we do, instead we focus on our problems. As I close, do you know that your problems themselves can be the seedbed for new opportunities? In Japanese, the word chaos is the same word for opportunity. Oh, wow. Let me give you an illustration from the sea again. You take an oyster, a mollusk, that is in it's there on the seabed. Now, what happens with that oyster is a grain of sand gets lodged in the adductor muscle of the mollusk. And it creates an irritant, an agitation. Because you know what it's like if you get something stuck in your foot, in your shoe. The sand creates an irritation. And what happens is, in order to assuage the aggravation, the oyster, the mollusk, produces some ointment that hardens. And you know what it turns into? A pearl. Sometimes, if you look at things in your life that aren't quite right, it's a sign the Lord is wanting to fix something, to change something, to adjust something. And even problems themselves can have opportunities that you didn't know you had beforehand. Sometimes we focus too much on our circumstances and we don't see the opportunities ahead of us. And I hope that as a result of our time together this morning, and again, thank you, Rabbi Phil, for affording me the opportunity to speak, I hope we're a little more minded to believe, yeah, we have a future, even us. I'm going to close with an anecdotal story, and I'm going to wear you out if I keep saying I'm going to close and I'm going to close and I don't close. There's nothing worse, than a preacher who says in closing and doesn't close. Enough already. It's been wonderful, but we got to eat. Enough. There's an old saying, I love a finished speaker. I really, truly do. I don't mean one who's polished. I just mean one who's through. Enough already. I'm going to finish up at Cambridge University. I'm going to be 72. One of the reasons why I'm shooting for it is when I started in my educational journey, I was 27. I flunked out of high school. And when I wanted to go, I was a janitor for the first 10 years of my life after high school. Nothing wrong with being a janitor. But if you have opportunities to do other things and capabilities, which I didn't know I had, but what happened is I felt a call into the ministry and I wanted to go to Bible college. So what happened is, I applied to the Moody Bible Institute to go to Bible college because they had a Jewish studies program. And they rejected me. The reason why they rejected me is all my grades in high school were D's and F's. You have these programs in high school for the loser kids, just to put them in that track to get rid of them, so they don't get stuck here. Enough already. Sei gesund, go. But for me, the problem was I was just stoned every day of my life. I was raised Jewish. I went to a yeshiva, but back when I was a teenager, I wasn't interested in Rabbi Hoffman. I was interested in Abby Hoffman. I was an old hippie. I was just stoned all the time. I didn't care. And so it was reflected in my transcripts. When I applied to Moody Bible Institute to get into college, they rejected it. And I remember I went and spoke to Rabbi Barry Berger with the American Board of Missions to the Jews, now called Chosen People Ministries, who was my mentor, as well as a guy, Jan Moskowitz, who died some years ago with Jews for Jesus. And I said, what should I do? They rejected me. Here's a Bible college, a Jew. Please come and prepare me. Forget it, you can't do it. So I said, what should I do? They said, go beg. Go beg. So I went back and I begged. I said, please, just give me a chance. So they'll put me on academic probation. Remember the first paper I ever wrote, there was a professor there, Louis Goldberg, Dr. Goldberg. And I remember it was a term paper. This is before computers. Now, when I typed it up, I thought it looked pretty good, to tell you the truth. But when I got it handed back, he must have gone through 2 red Bic pens. I thought when I gave it to him, it was perfect. What's this all about? I mean, some devil got in and rearranged everything. So, I mean, I could barely read my own typing. He had some red ink everywhere. So finally, you keep flipping the page. It's my first paper. I'm just new to this sort of thing. I'm flipping it. Okay, I guess. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, he suggested I use a dictionary. Well, I just, however it sounded good to me. So I get to the end. And so at the bottom of the last page, there's a B and an F. Well, I forget, maybe it was an F and a B. Now I was confused. I was used to F's and D's and stuff, but I never saw a grade FB. Today, maybe Facebook or something, I don't know. But, back then, I'm in the Flintstones, another bygone era, F and B. I didn't know from nothing. So I went up to him and says, Dr. Goldberg, I have a question about my paper. You call that a paper? Yeah, I got. I said, look, I got the impression there were 1 or 2 things wrong with it. He says, yeah, Jeffrey, now that you mention it. I says, yeah, I could kind of tell with all the red ink and everything, but here's where I'm confused. I read your notes, but here's where I'm confused. When you got to the end, it's F and B. What's that all about? He says, Jeffrey, you're in a college. This is a college paper. Jeffrey, your term paper was an absolute train wreck. So judging it as a college paper, that's an F. Well, I said, well, by virtue of all the red ink, before I saw that F, I kind of figured that's where that was going. What's the B? He said, that's the grade I'm giving you. And I said, why is that? He says, Jeffrey, I see what you're trying to say. Wow. I see what you're trying to do. He said, Jeffrey, as you begin your journey, and this is your first semester on a journey, as you begin your journey, you're going to take classes in English and English composition, and you're going to get all that stuff along the way. And you're going to clean up that stuff. He says, Jeffrey, I see what you're trying to. I want to close for real now telling you that you want to look at the potential, even in your circumstances, even in your failure, even in the train wreck, the sweet spot, the energy, the thing that pulsates, what's there, and give expression to that, build a life around that, follow that leading, and see where the Lord leads you. May the Lord bless the ministry of the word. Rabbi, thank you for affording me the opportunity to share this morning. God bless you.